Okay, so we're basically done for the semester, right? We're running out of time here, and we're gonna finish up with some logistical stuff today, tomorrow. But there's a lot we haven't managed to cover this semester. There's so much in coastal marine management. A lot of stuff we just touched on, or we might have only had some readings on the topic or what have you. But I hope you guys had a decent introduction to the whole issue of management within the coastal zone. It's important, though, that sometimes I bum you guys out. I'm accused of being negative sometimes, or being overly depressing or something. That, oh my God, the fisheries are dead, the coastal zone is totally developed, all that kind of stuff. And the reality is, those are real challenges. But sometimes I focus a bit too much on the negative stuff. There's a reason, but it's important to also leave you guys with the notion that we're not completely screwed here, right? We have made successful forays into dealing with challenging situations, and in some cases we've done a great job. So after this, I want to end with a little discussion about your guys' ideas for your examples of things that have been successful. But I want to start with saying that even in the field of fisheries that we've spent some time discussing and reading about and exploring, right? It's this old pattern where we had a lot of things, a lot of abalone, a lot of fish, a lot of lobster, whatever the case may be, and then we sucked it all out, and now we have but a fraction of what we used to have, right? The implication is that we're screwed. The implication is that, oh my God, you can be like Sylvia Earle and say nobody should ever eat fish, and don't ever eat anything from the ocean. Or you can be like some of our science colleagues and say, oh my God, the answer is the newest and most recent greatest thing, in this case, marine reserves, protected areas, that'll save us. A useful tool, probably part of an effective recovery strategy, but we don't just have to set aside things that we never ever touch or never ever interact with. So let's talk about a couple examples. This first one is a white sea bass. The common name here is a white sea bass, but it's not a bass, it's not a saranid. But really popular fish. Who's eaten white sea bass here recently? Couple people? Well, only one? Only Alex has eaten white sea bass recently? Wow, it's a great fish. I would not have survived working out in Catalina for all those years without eating white sea bass. So here's the traditional story of white sea bass, right? This looks like one of our stories that we've heard about for a while. In that people maybe weren't exploiting it initially early on very much. And then we came back after World War II with our incredible tools and prowess, and we start to exploit, and boom, 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 we get huge commercial landings. Again, this is year on the bottom, and this is landings in terms of metric tons on the y-axis. And it's just boom, it crashed, right? We've never again seen the landings we saw in the immediate post-war period. So same things, but something funky happens here in the late or early 1990s. And now we're starting to go a little bloop, bloop, bloop up. Any notions of what that might be from maybe some of our readings? We haven't discussed it in class, but anything change in the early 90s? Good guess. It's not. Well, we don't know for sure, right? This is an experimental test. This is looking at observed patterns, but probably not food fish or forage for the critter. Yeah, Alex.
So if I have restriction on the catch numbers and also MPA sizes.
Okay, so the question there is maybe it's changing something about how many we catch. That probably has something to do with it, but actually the rules didn't change on how many you could land. And the other comment he had was about protected areas, marine protected areas. Yeah. Those hadn't really rolled. I mean, there was some old ones like the one in Scorpion and Catalina, but there were no new ones at that point, the early 90s. Any other guesses? Temperature guess, good guess, but probably not. So this was a proposition that the voters passed, and it was to ban gill. So gillnet is a type of fishing that is non-selective, right? We haven't talked about this really, but suffice it to say it's a big net. And if anything's small enough, it can go through the mesh in the net. If anything is too super giant, like a whale, it'll bump into the net and the net will, give and it'll swim away. But fish that are about the right size, they'll put their head through they'll attempt to swim through the mesh, the diamond or whatever the shape is, and they can't go all the way through. Then they try to back out, and their opercula, the things that cover their gills, they get stuck on it, so they're essentially trapped in the net. So it's a passive fishing thing. A fisherman will lay it out and wait for it, and then at some point in the future go along and collect that net. So these things were banned. They were legal before, and then after this proposition said, hey, you can't do this, particularly on the backside of Catalina Island. And there you go. Check that out. So here we have this ban, and now something happens by the late 90s. We're starting to see landings increase. Gesundheit. And this is commercial landings. And we have increasing evidence from things other than our fishing data that things might be indeed changing. So this is the commercial catch per unit effort. So this is standardized, again, just to remind you, this is standardized by how many folks are doing the fishing, how many vessels, how many people, that kind of stuff. And so this is expressed, this particular axis is expressed in metric tons per commercial vessel going out and trying to catch fish. And what we see is from the point in the immediate wake of this gillnet ban going into effect, regardless of how many ships are out there, the number of white sea bass that are captured per vessel is going up, and it's going up significantly so, highly significantly so. This is not a random fluctuation. This is not a 1 year better than the other. This is a consistent pattern. And not only do we, so this is the important part, not only do we see commercial landings, but these are the babies, these are the juveniles, these are the younger life history stages. And what we're seeing is, we're seeing more of these young life history stages. Now there's noise around this. There's some that are really high and some that are lower, but we're still on this upward trend. That's telling us that it's not just something about the older adults, but actually this is something that's influencing the population as a whole. And we're starting to invest in this population again, and we're beginning to have new individuals enter the population that as they get older in age, get to the size that either recreational or commercial fishermen might be wanting to target. And another line of evidence that suggests that things are getting better is this is in the immediate wake. So this is a little pixelated for you guys in the back. This is just the same thing. This is landings. This is not catch per unit effort. This is just total landings. So this is not paying attention to how many vessels we're fishing. But the point is, the light brown is recreational. The light blue is commercial. And what we see is initially in the immediate wake of the ban, the recreational stuff is outpacing the commercial exploitation. This is up to the early 2000s. This is the early 2000s onward. And what you see is now, these are the same scale, just it was hard to get them on one graph. What you see is now we've switched. So now the commercial landings are outpacing the recreational stuff, which says that the commercial fishermen see this as a significant, a stable enough, a sustainable enough resource that it's worth targeting them again. So all of these good positive signs that in the case of California white sea bass, we are managing them better. They're not back to the crazy days that they maybe were back in the day, but nevertheless, clear, absolute, no question about it, improvements in this fish stock. So when people say we're screwed and we cannot manage this fish or fish stocks, that's not true. This is a fish that's being managed outside of the context of typical marine protected areas, which is what everyone says these days is the holy grail. That's what we're all working towards. There are many ways to build effective management, Marine protected areas are one, but there's a whole host of other things. And this suggests that, hey, if you stop slaughtering the babies and stop doing blurry, inconsistent, not focused fishing efforts, that, hey, maybe that actually really can improve our fish populations. And as evidence of this, a few years ago, we got the world record white sea bass in Malibu, right? So that fish is almost 100 pounds. That probably would not, well, you can't say this for sure, but the likelihood of getting that was most likely dramatically boosted by reducing gill nets, because that means fish had a greater chance of surviving and getting up to these larger stages rather than have these tons and tons and tons of gill nets taking out the juvenile life history stages. Okay, so that's one story. Another story, let's talk about another California story. This is what I grew up learning is called black sea bass, and then the name is changed, and now we're supposed to call them giant sea bass. But in any event, big, huge thing. These are the apex predator on most, or these were the apex predator on most of our California reefs for most of our reef-associated organisms. Yes, there are sea otters. Yes, there were great white sharks and things. But as far as a typical resident on a typical rocky reef in Southern California, black sea bass were it. These are huge fish. If you recall, I showed that picture early in the semester of this lady hauling up this hundreds of pounds fish off the Magoo Pier 100 years ago. These are large fish. The largest one I've ever seen in real life underwater was about a decade or so ago, probably more like 15 years ago now. And it was in a kelp bed off of Catalina. And I was doing an experiment where I was carrying concrete around the bottom. So I was on the bottom of the ocean with a bunch of weight, essentially. And I was moonwalking across the bottom. So I had my fins off, and I was carrying these big, heavy things across the bottom with a scuba tank on. And it's very difficult because there's rocks and things, so it's like hiking across a rocky reef. So I mostly am looking down so I don't twist my ankle or fall or something like that. And out of the corner of my eye, I wish I had a picture to show you, but out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something, and I turned, and there was something that made me almost mess myself, I'll say. It was this giant thing sitting there looking right at me with this huge eye. It looked massive. It looked to be about the size of a VW bug. It was probably about half the size of a VW bug. But it was awesome. That was a juvenile giant sea bass. These guys are huge. And these guys suck up anything. They eat whatever. Massive gape here. So this guy's head, this full adult's head, from the bottom of his jaw here up to the top is probably about that big. I mean, huge fish. Hundreds of pounds. And this guy just, whatever he can suck up. Squid, senoritas, kelp bass, whatever the heck this guy would munch. And so these guys are really, really important. And yeah, so the record is almost 550 pounds. So huge, taller than me, and a couple more pounds than me. So again, the juveniles are also pretty cool. The juveniles look a little bit different. They're spotty. They're speckled. And so again, look, it appears to be the same old story, right? We used to have these things. They were absolutely central parts of our offshore coastal environment. We sucked a lot of them out of the ocean, and now there's not that many left, right? So as we enter the early 1990s, not that many. Another example would be some of our sharks. Some of our sharks have been particularly hard hit and whacked and nuked. They include sharks like this, which might be a more typical shark that you would think of when I say the word shark, or things like leopard sharks, which are a little bit different. They tend to hang out more in coastal areas and chill out on the bottom for a lot of the daytime. And these guys eat things more like crustaceans and snails and stuff of that nature. So yeah, leopard sharks. I can tell you a story about leopard sharks if you want, but ask me later. So we had all these guys, And in this case, we're talking about our more pelagic shark and our more demersal or bottom-associated sharks. And we caught a lot, and they've been reduced. But even with all these things, so now we're seeing, as we've reduced the amount of gill netting and changed some of the regulations to, again, be more, have less bycatch, less unintended things. What we're starting to see across the board is increases in catch per unit effort. So this is for a guy that swims around the water column. This is for a guy that stays pretty close to shore. This is for a massive apex predator that ranges down into Mexico and up into Southern California. All of these guys are going in the right direction. So I just heard a talk by Daniel Pauly a couple weeks ago, who's sort of one of the fathers of our modern thinking about global fisheries. And when someone asked him a question, he said probably the best managed, he said we're not managing any of our fisheries ideally. But he said pretty clearly the best managed fisheries are in the US, and California is probably the best managed in the US. Not Alaska, not all the Alaska Marketing Board and all that kind of stuff, but actually California. Now, it hasn't been perfect. We've partly achieved the success by putting a lot of fishermen out of work. But the point being, these numbers are going up. You should not leave this class with the impression that we don't know anything, that we don't know how to recover these species. We do know how to do it. The challenge is not, as is most of the case with our resource management challenges, the challenge is not in needing to invent a new technology by and large. The challenge is not in managing the fish. The challenge is not in managing the coastal bluffs. The challenge is in managing humans. The challenge is in managing us. That's the nut of the problem. And so all these guys are going in the right direction. So do not let someone say California fisheries are screwed. You know, we're all going to hell in a handbasket. We do still have lots of challenges. I'm not saying it's a perfect world, but do not take away the stories from some of the old papers that you read from 20 years ago or what have you that have gotten into some of the textbooks and things that we're still in this downward spiral. When you have places that have effective governance, strong management, and science-based targets, as well as truly collaborative management with the resource. Not the scientists telling the fishermen what to do, but truly collaborative with the local folks and the managers, everybody working together, we can get these numbers to go up, right? This is a survey class. This isn't a class only on fisheries, but were we to have had more time to go into fisheries, we could talk about some of these things. If you guys are interested in this, one thing you might want to think about doing is taking our Thursday night class, our 483 class. We're going to be talking about Pacific Island management of Pacific Islands, and fisheries management will feature heavily in those. And a large part of that story is how we work with, or how people are working with local communities, and how local communities are partnering with scientists to get these kind of numbers in other parts of the world. So don't leave thinking we're totally screwed. And as but one example, these giant sea bass are crazy. I sent out an email earlier in the semester about I forget what they call it, the Great Giant Sea Bass Count. Do you guys remember that? It was on. I put it up. I sent it to you guys, and I also put it up on our Scoop It site. Did anybody see that? You guys don't remember that? Okay, so then you shouldn't feel bad, because when I talked to my colleague that was doing it, he said 7 people across California responded to his. The idea was supposed to be a citizen science thing. It was over a couple-day period. Any surfers, any scuba divers, any fishermen were to report across California if they saw any of these very conspicuous but not numerically abundant fish. And it unfortunately only got 7 people responding. So that's what happens when scientists try to use Twitter and things. But so that was sort of a failure. But the very fact that we could start to think about doing citizen science to survey these guys tells us we're going in the right direction. And so what we have here is this is number of individuals at Palos Verde, off in the southern part of Los Angeles County, and how many we've seen at these surveys. And these are surveys that have been done consistently for several decades. These surveys weren't designed to only look for giant sea bass. These are surveys designed to look for all kinds of fish. So these are done all the time. They're done routinely. They're long-term monitoring. And when you look back in the data in 74 and et cetera, we didn't see any of them. These guys are an endangered species. I didn't mention that. These guys are actually an endangered fish. In the early 80s, they garnered that protection. Still didn't see any. So just putting them on the endangered species list didn't do anything. The gill net closure seems to again have been a big part of this. So first, the protected status means nobody can take them anytime. So an occasional spear fisherman, who maybe back in the day might have wanted to have taken them, as happened in the 60s and stuff, that couldn't happen. But then when you add the gill net closure, now we're starting to see more of these guys come up. Now we don't have the numbers that we used to have back in the day, but the very fact that these guys are being encountered on routine surveys is pretty cool. I saw another talk a couple weeks ago where a guy did just this exact thing at Catalina Island and off some of the northern Channel Islands using scooters, and he actually saw over the summer something, I'm going to get it wrong, I want to say something like 40 individuals at Catalina Island, which is for a big, huge fish, apex predator, huge. They're mostly small, but clearly if we don't nuke them over the next, and these fish live for many decades. So if we don't nuke them, these guys are going to return to their role as major important drivers of our nearshore coastal ecosystem. So that's super cool. You should clap. That's right. That's right. See? It's not all doom and gloom. So all these guys are far from perfectly recovered relative to the pre-exploitation era, but they're all going in the right direction. So my question for you is, can you guys think of anything we've talked about, or any places we've visited, or readings we've had? What are some examples that you've had, or that you know of, about that are positive, that are signs of hope? Okay, so those are all good. So do we have challenges? Is climate change a real thing? Is sea level rise a real thing? Is climate change a real thing? Is increasing numbers of people using the coastal zone leading to more conflicts a thing? All this stuff is real. But we have all these fishery examples. We have what we've just listed on the board. We have island foxes. We have kelp beds. We have coastal access. We have country of origin labeling laws. We have sea otters, northern elephant seals, brown pelicans. One story I didn't tell you guys is American alligator. Things that were really bad, and again, maybe not perfect now, but are a tremendous improvement. So we do have the ability to improve these resources. Don't get lulled into this thinking that it's all game over, we've all totally lost it, and I'm just going to go and drink my life away, or smoke my life away, or Xbox my life away, or whatever, right? It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Now, we have huge challenges ahead of us. And sometimes those challenges are scary. And sometimes those challenges are depressing and worrisome. But they need not be, right? If something is easy to do, it's pretty much BS. If something is simple, no problem, it's not worth doing, generally speaking. I would posit to you, especially in the management realm. If we wanted to say, I don't know, don't kill kittens. Okay, I guess we could say don't kill kittens. But that's not very challenging, right? Most people would say, yeah, let's not kill kittens. The challenge is to say, hey, we need to deal with spay and neutering laws. That's more of a challenge, right? That's more of some people like, don't tell me what I'm doing with my kitty cat, right? And so as you guys, most of you guys are seniors, most of you guys are getting ready to go off and do things. I would hope that a lot of you guys do something about coastal stuff. But as you do that, don't ever feel like we can't make an impact. We can't do good things. So they're all across the board. Our list on the board there is organismal stuff, policy stuff, ecosystem stuff, all those things we have the capacity to improve. And it's going to take people like you guys that are so motivated, that are interested in this, and that know some of the facts and some of the ongoing issues to actually be able to effectively fix that. So cool. All right. Awesome possum.